Hi, quick video on close chord voicings and what they can show you about which notes are changing when you go from chord to chord. And that's a really good thing to know because it'll give you a basis for lead lines and fills, a strong basis for those, because you'll be targeting the notes that really strike the ear, because we really hear these movements. So there's change, but there's not a huge change. So I can go from A7 to D7, and I can take the whole chord up, in the same shape and quite a distance on the neck, or I can go from A7 to D7 there. And when I do this and use these chord voicings that are close to each other, I'm going to hear more. It's going to be more striking which notes change in the chord, but just a little bit, like, for example. So let's go through note by note, or rather string by string, and see what changes from. So let's say we're doing a blues in A, and A is my 1 chord, and D is my 4 chord, A7 and D7. And like I said, these movements will be a great basis for any lead line or fill, because they stand out. They're what the ear really picks up on. So when I go from A7 to D7, going one string at a time, what changes on the low E string? Well, basically, I've got my root for the A chord on the low E string, and then I don't play the low E string, and I go to the A string 5th fret for the root of the D chord. But this is an E string, and this is an E string. So what happens on the top E string? Well, when I'm playing A7, on the top E string, I've got the 5th fret, which is the note A, which is the root of that chord. And then when I go to D7, I've still got the note A. It is now the 5th of the D chord. So I could stay on the note A, I could stay on the note A, and for the 1 chord, for the A chord, it would be the root note, and for the 4 chord, it would be the 5th of that chord. And that'll be a strong line, because you're emphasizing it's the same note, but it's going to sound different in the context of the 1st chord and the 2nd chord, or the 1st chord and the 4th chord. Because for the 1st chord, it's the root. And for the 2nd chord, it's the 5th. Okay, let's move on to the A string. Hope that makes sense. Let's move on to the A string. Ooh. When I'm on the A string, for my 1 chord, my A7, I've got the 7th fret of the A string. That's the note E. When I go to the D chord, I've got the 5th fret of the A string, that's the note D. So, for the A chord, for the 1 chord, it's the note E, which is the 5th of that chord. And then there's a movement down 2 frets, or a tone, to the note D. So I'm going from E to D. So typically I might do a chromatic line. And of course, that can be just a little fill in your rhythm playing. For example, and of course going back. Going back, I can just reverse it, go from the D to the E chromatically. Or I don't have to do a chromatic, of course. I could just, do some other expression there. It was just hammer-ons between the 2 notes. But that's going to be a strong sound, because you're using chord tones from both chords that are very close together. These were a tone apart. Okay, moving on to the D string. So on the D string, my A chord, I've got the 5th fret, which is the note G, which for the A chord is the flat 7. Now, this is a very typical one, a very well heard one that you keep hearing. So this flat 7 of the A chord, that's the 5th fret on the D string. When I go to a D chord, it goes down to the 4th fret, or the 5th, or goes up to the 7th fret. Now, depending on your voicing, if I have this voicing, the A7 voicing for the D chord, it goes up to the 7th fret, which is the note A, and that's the 5th for the D chord. So I could do this sort of line. And of course you can add to the line, but the main thing is the basis of the line is going to be this movement from that chord tone in the A to what happens on the same string, that chord tone for the D. Now I started off thinking about the A and the D there, and when I was thinking about the D, I always think when I do that voicing, because it doesn't include the 3rd until you get up into this octave, there's the 3rd for D. Well, I always think of the 3rd also just a fret down from the root note on the D string, on the 1 string up. And a very typical thing you do here is that movement from the flat 7 of the 1 chord and then that can be included in this C shape. But that movement from the flat 7 of the 1 chord to the 3rd, the major 3rd of the 4 chord. And of course, if it's happening in this octave, it'll happen in another octave. It'll happen in every octave. So if I did this voicing of an A chord, where I put my little finger on the B string, in this case on the 8th fret, well, that's the octave of the flat 7. Yeah, it's the note G still. And then if I do my A7 voicing for the D chord, I find myself just moving down semitone, just as I did here, but it's now going to be in this octave, and that's a really strong sound because they're only a semitone apart, so there's a change, but it's a little change, which seems to be what the ear likes most. Yeah, and of course you can add other things to it, but this, as I said, the movement, the chord tone movement in close voicing, yeah, is going to be the basis of your line, your lead line or your fill. Yeah, okay, so we got as far as D string, another classic one. That was basically the flat 7 to the flat 7 of the 1 chord to the 3rd, the major 3rd of the 4 chord, and we also looked at that on the B string as well. Now on the G string, I've got 6th fret on the G string for the 1 chord, for the A7. So the 6th fret of the G string is a C sharp, it's the major 3rd of the chord, which goes down 1 semitone. These semitone changes are particularly powerful or striking to the ear. So it goes down 1 semitone to the 5th fret on the G string, which is the flat 7 of the 4 chord. It's the note C and it's the flat 7 of the note of the chord D7. So yeah, so again this could be the basis of a rhythm, fill, an embellishment, or a lead line. Whoops. Yeah. Yeah, so the hook there was, and then the rest of the line was the same phrase but using that different note for the different chords. So yeah, that sort of thing. And you might have recognised that sounds rather like a line in what is it? Respect, I think. Yeah. So variations on that, you're going to find all sorts of variations on having these voicings, these close voicings, those movements. They're going to be at the basis of a lot of lead playing, but particularly, I suppose, rhythm playing and embellishments, the harmony of moving from one chord to the other, and what strikes the ear. So if we get to the B string, we've already done this voicing where the little finger is on the B string 8th fret, which then goes to 7th fret for the 4 chord. But also, of course, I could just have the voicing without the little finger, and that means I've got 5th fret, which is the note E, which is the 5th. That's for the 1 chord. And then when I get to the 4 chord, I've got that major third that I was just talking about. It's C sharp for the D7. Sorry, not C sharp. F sharp. So I'm going from E to F sharp, and again. Okay, so you get that movement is the basis of whatever else I can hang on to it or extend it with. Okay, and we've done the top E string, so I hope that helps.